Member items 15 through 19 shall be continued. On Assembly third reading, file items 21 through 28 pass and retain. Moving to file item 29 is ACR 192. Clerk will read.
Assembly Concurrent Resolution 192 by Assemblymember Gordon relative to California Nonprofits Day.
Mr. Gordon, you may open on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. ACR 192 would declare June 22nd of 2016 as California Nonprofits Day. This resolution recognizes that California's nonprofits are trusted institutions that provide services to the needy, improve quality of life, promote community values, and incite social change. The nonprofit community in California ranks as the fourth largest industry by employment, accounting for 1 in every 16 Californian jobs. Further, nonprofits are a large and vital part of California's economy. Nonprofit economic activity contributes to 15% of the gross state product and brings in at least $40 billion in revenue from out-of-state sources each year. It's important that we raise awareness of the many benefits that nonprofit organizations bring to our communities and to California. I respectfully ask for an aye vote on ACR 192 and ask that the first roll be open for co-authors.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. Seeing no discussion or debate on the resolution, the first roll will be open for co-authors. Clerk will open the roll. Members, this is for co-authors adding on to ACR 192. This is for co-authors. Co-authors on the resolution. Clerk will close the roll. There are 74 co-authors added. Without objection, we may take a voice vote on the resolution. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The resolution is adopted. Mr. Gordon, back to you for your guest introductions relative to this resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, in relationship to California Nonprofits Day, I'd like to introduce two guests who are here in the chambers with us. First, Jan Masaoka, who is President and CEO of Cal Nonprofits. And secondly, Chris Sinclair, Board Member with Cal Nonprofits and Executive Director of the California Symphony Orchestras. Let's please give them a warm Assembly welcome.
Members, back on the file item 30, pass and retain. File item 31. File item 31 is AJR 38 by Mr. Garcia. Clerk will read.
Assembly Joint Resolution 38 by Assemblymember Eduardo Garcia relative to immigration.
Mr. Garcia, you may open on the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. AJR 38 is a measure that would urge the United States Congress and the President to support and sign the Correcting Hurtful and Alienating Names in Government Expression Act, also known as the Change Act. This resolution is companion to a bill, Assembly Bill 1850, which passed through many committees and this Assembly floor on consent. Without the Change Act, California is unable to finalize its code change since the federal definition of alien remains in the code. Members, the word alien is derogatory and outdated. According to the dictionary, the word alien means an individual differing in nature or character and typically to the point of incompatibility. I do not believe that this word belongs in our code, and it certainly is not reflective of our community and our countries. So, members, I respectfully ask for your support for AJR 38.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Seeing no discussion or debate on this item, this is an AJR and requires a roll call vote. Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who wish to vote. All members vote who wish to vote. All members vote who wish to vote. Clerk will close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 59, noes 8. The resolution is adopted. File item 32, pass and retain on Senate third reading. File items 33 through 37, as well as file item 39, pass and retain. Members, we have one bill on call. That's file item 38, Senate Bill 308. I'm prepared to lift the call on that item. Clerk will post. All members vote who desire to vote. 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 Close the roll. Tally the vote. Ayes 36, noes 22. Measure fails. Mr. Stone notices reconsideration. Moving to announcements and adjournments in memory. Following members were granted prior permission to speak on an adjournment in memory. Members, please take your seats. Please take your seats, members, so we may proceed. Thank you, members. Ms. Gonzalez, you are recognized for your adjournment in memory.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to ask that we adjourn in the memory of Helen Chavez. Helen is best known as the wife of Cesar Chavez, but was often overlooked in her essential role in the creation and sustaining of the United Farm Workers of America and its overall success. She was Cesar's foundation and strongest supporter and was a backbone to the farm worker movement in California. Helen was born on January 21st, 1928 in the town of Brawley in the Imperial Valley. At the age of 8, she moved with her family to Delano. Helen started working in the fields at a young age after dropping out of school to help support her family and help support her siblings when one of her parents died. In the mid-1940s, Helen met and married Cesar Chavez, and when Cesar started organizing, he was often on the road. Helen stayed back to help raise their children. She even had to work in the fields in order to support her family while Cesar was away from home. She was known for being quiet and humble. She didn't often speak in public, but when she did, her words truly mattered. One of the best-known stories was in September of 1965, while Cesar's young Latino union debated whether or not to join a grave strike that was begun that month by members of a largely Filipino union in the same fields. Helen settled the debate once and forever by simply asking the question, are we a union or not? This was a historic and key moment in the farm worker movement because it unified two communities that still share a very strong tie thanks to her very obvious question. Along with raising her own family, she ran the Farm Workers Credit Union, was the cook for union volunteers, and even acted as a surrogate mother to young volunteers and traveled to Delano, La Paz, and UFW headquarters in Keene. Despite her important role in history, she remained a humble woman that enjoyed the simple things in life, like spending Saturdays with her family. She was an exemplary leader and passionate to the core, committed to public service, and committed to the very core of what her husband was committed to, ensuring that our state and our country was just a little bit more fair to farm workers. Helen Chavez is survived by her 7 surviving children, 31 grandchildren, and 16 great-grandchildren. She will be missed, but she will not be forgotten, and the movement will continue in her honor. Please join me in adjourning in the memory of Helen Chavez.
Thank you, Ms. Gonzalez. Mr. Salas, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I also rise to adjourn in the memory of Helen Chavez. I can tell you personally, Helen was an individual that was never one to grandstand or to jump on stage or be in the limelight, but she was definitely a force to be reckoned with. She was one of those individuals that would bring that common sense, like previous speakers noted. She would bring that just common sense and ask a question. Something that just drove to the heart of a debate. I know when I spoke with her, she always had a quiet self-determination about her. You knew she was always involved. You knew she was intelligent. You knew where she stood, and then she would just talk to you as an individual and let you know, here are the values you should consider. She was never, like I said, that person to jump on stage and lead the rally cry, but really one of those individuals that just kind of spoke to your heart. And I know she'll be greatly missed by her family, her daughters, her kids, her grandchildren, many who I've had the pleasure of interacting with and meeting. But I know they've come a long way from when they had their house on Kensington Street in Delano. And members, please join all of us in honoring this remarkable woman and adjourning in her memory. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Salas. Mr. Alejo, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I also rise on behalf of my colleagues in the Latino caucus to honor a great giant of the civil rights and the farm worker rights movement. Many of us recognize that we're here today serving in these halls because of some courageous people that sacrifice a lot of themselves, sacrifice their families to give the children and grandchildren of farm worker a better life, a better opportunity, and some hope and inspiration. We cannot tell the story of the great labor leader Cesar Chavez without telling the story of Helen Chavez. You're only telling half the story when you talk about the life of Cesar Chavez, when you do not mention his better half, his wife, who was buried this morning in Keene in La Paz, just outside of Bakersfield, laid to rest right next to her husband, Cesar Chavez. And it was Helen who allowed Cesar to become an acclaimed international labor leader. While he was traveling from place to place organizing, she was many times there with him. Even before they founded the United Farm Workers, they were organizing for the Community Service Organization under Fred Ross. And they would move from place to place organizing everyday hardworking people in working class neighborhoods, whether it was the Sal Si Puedes neighborhood in San Jose, or whether it was in their neighborhood in East Los Angeles, where they lived before they decided to come back to the Central Valley in Delano in 1962 to begin organizing farm workers. So, and there's many historic moments when she was there. There's that famous photograph by the photographer George Ballas when Cesar Chavez ended his 35-day strike. And right next to Robert Kennedy was Helen Chavez. On the other side, it was Cesar Chavez's mother. But these are the historic moments. But if you could imagine, out of so many different rallies, so many different events, she never spoke publicly, not once. But she was a force behind the scenes. While Cesar Chavez was away, it was Helen who raised a family of 8. And even at times when the family was struggling because they were only earning $5 a week, only $5 a week, Helen had to return back working in the agricultural fields to help maintain the family so Cesar could keep doing that powerful organizing that he was doing all over the country and other parts of the world. So when you see a legend, an amazing woman pass away, for somebody like me, you just can't stay sitting down on my desk without saying some words out of respect for a person who was humble, but who was a quiet force behind the movement to improve the lives of so many farm workers across the state of California and across our nation. And I want to offer my respect and my condolences to the Chavez family and all her grandchildren and children who are a testament to that amazing work that both of them did together to improve the lives of hardworking Californians.
Thank you, Mr. Alejo. Mr. Garcia, you are recognized.
Mr. Speaker and members, I too rise in a journey of memory for Helen Chavez, who, as was mentioned, was born in Brawley, California. And as a gentleman that I am, I won't say what year. But members, as you know, standing on this floor and living the life of public service is not an easy task. Many of us understand that we would not be here without a support system that provides and plays an integral role in our day-to-day lives as public servants. More specifically, many of us depend on a significant other that propels us forward when we need it the most. As a wife of one of the most historic labor and icon individuals in this nation, we should recognize Helen Chavez as a woman who stood by his side through it all. And let me reiterate, we honor today the woman who stood by Chavez's side, never behind. Described as a humble person, Ms. Chavez used her determination to help change the lives of thousands of farm workers who were inspired by La Causa. Since her husband spent most of the time traveling and organizing farm workers throughout the state, Helen was one who stayed home to raise the children and the grandchildren. She was known as the mother of the fields. She identified as a strong Chicana woman who was socially, politically conscious aware of what was going on with the work that her husband and the thousands of farm workers were undertaking. Even up until her death, her family members describe her as a very strong, enthusiastic individual who was very civic-minded and encouraged everyone to go out and vote in this historic election this year. In fact, a family member says that she made sure that she filled out her absentee ballot and sent it out prior to her passing. It's with deep appreciation that I'm able to stand and adjourn in her memory. As was mentioned again, she was born in, as the Brawley folks would say, in Brole, California. And I ask that we adjourn in her memory. Thank you.
Mr. Medina, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I am honored to adjourn in memory of Helen Chavez, labor activist with the United Farm Workers and wife of Cesar Chavez. Helen's parents were farm workers who immigrated to California after the Mexican Revolution. Helen began working in the fields at the age of 7 and was forced to stop attending school at the age of 15 to work to support her family after the passing of her father. She met her husband, Cesar Chavez, in Delano while they were both laboring as farm workers. They corresponded while he served in the Navy and married upon Cesar's discharge from the Navy in 1948. Due to her father's involvement in the Mexican Revolution, Helen was influenced at a young age to be involved in political activism, and she and her husband soon became involved in labor organizing. She and her husband Cesar became the lead organizers with the community service organization known as the CSO, which was one of the most successful Latino civil rights group of the time. Through voter registration drives, citizenship classes, and legislative campaigns, the CSO aimed to enable immigrants to impact the political system and move into the mainstream society of the United States. Her involvement in the CSO, along with other women behind the scenes, made the CSO one of the most successful associations for Mexican Americans in California during that time. In 1962, Helen, along with her husband, made the choice to leave a middle-class life, and return to their chosen life of poverty in order to begin building what later would become the United Farm Workers. Between family and work, she dedicated her spare time to helping the cause of the CSO and also taught literacy classes for migrant workers. Helen challenged the role of women in the movement and provided a template for other women who wanted to get involved in activism. Her legacy is felt throughout California, and she will be missed. I am proud to have known her, and I ask that we adjourn in her memory.
Thank you, Mr. Medina. Dr. Eggman, you are recognized for your adjournment in memory.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today and ask that we adjourn in the memory of the 49 people who were massacred on Saturday night at Pulse, Orlando, and to keep those still struggling for their lives in our prayers. We adjourn in their memories, and our thoughts are with the families, friends, and community who are left behind to grieve and try to make sense of this senseless tragedy. They were mostly all young men, they were mostly all Latino, and they were out celebrating who they were, dancing and enjoying themselves in a nightclub where they felt safe. Bars have long been a gathering place for the LGBT community, the place where we could be totally free and open. It was Stonewall Bars, you might recall, where the LGBT movement was born. When you're not welcome in your church or in your community or in your home or in your workplace, it's invaluable to find places where you can just be who you are. Bars and nightclubs have provided that refuge. And generally understood, even though sometimes they're in rough neighborhoods, if you could make it to the bar okay inside, you would be safe from harassment. And that this happened during Pride Month. When we think of even the word pride, what does that mean? To be proud means you refuse to be ashamed. You refuse to deny who you are. It's not enough to have people tolerate you, but to be proud about who you are, to be able to walk in freedom. Political dialogue and pushback to the LGBT visibility and expanded rights, things like marriage equality, equal protections, laws about non-discriminations, which we still don't have in 32 states in this country, help fuel the fire of anger, distrust, and hatreds for those individuals who are most vulnerable to become violent. Every parent who has had a child come out to them, their first thought always is, will they be safe? All parents have told all of us, I want you to be safe. I fear for your safety. What will people do? What will people think? People will be mean to you. You shouldn't have to be brave to be who you are. You shouldn't have to be brave to publicly love who you love. People might say, why do you have to be so public? Why do you have to go out? Why do we have to have pride? The question should be, why do we have to hide? Why do we have to hide from silent judgment? Why do we have to hide from bullying? And why do we have to duck and cover from assault weapons? People know I served in the military. I got a message over the weekend from someone I served with 35 years ago. 35 years ago, when I was a young 19, 20-year-old. And I haven't talked to him in forever, but through Facebook he contacted me. And he said, I want you to watch out and be safe. Notice your surroundings like you used to when you were younger. And I just replied, I never stopped. Members, I ask that we hold the pictures of those young men's and women's faces in our minds and in our hearts. I ask that we embrace the photos of their weeping parents, the community at risk, and as we adjourn in their memory, that we recommit to filling our hearts with love, with acceptance, with embracing our diversity that is at the very core of the freedom that we all hold so dear.
Thank you, Dr. Eggman. Mr. Speaker, you are recognized.
Members, once again we stand together in sorrow, revulsion, and anger over an act of violence that has claimed lives and devastated families. 49 people, including several Californians, were murdered in Orlando simply because they were LGBT. People out on a Saturday night, living their lives, just like the group at Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston, getting ready for an evening of Bible study. Just like the children at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Connecticut, getting ready for the excitement of the holidays. Like many of the responses to the shootings in Orlando that have come in from around the globe, we hope to do something here that will bring comfort to those who have lost friends and loved ones. We want to help. The best way for us to help is to do whatever we can to make this stop. I want to remind you that these tragedies do not regularly occur in other countries. We have to stop hatred and bigotry at their roots. We have to stop the real threat posed by extremism. And we have to stop the all too easy access so many have to the tools of destruction used in violence and hate crimes and acts of terror. At times like these, many of the comments relate to our thoughts and prayers, being with victims and those they were taken from. May I just say that today my thoughts are with the people who find the strength, the courage, and the wisdom to stand up and do what needs to be done.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Alejo, you are recognized.
Mr. Speaker and colleagues, on behalf of the members of the Latino caucus, we also rise in memory of the 49 innocent victims who tragically lost their lives and the dozens more who are survivors of that horrible incident because of that horrific terrorist attack in Orlando that occurred over the weekend. This atrocity hits particularly close for home for our caucus as the attack targeted Latin night at the Pulse nightclub in downtown Orlando. And as a result, the vast majority of the victims who were murdered or injured were Latinos. Many of them were young people who were just barely beginning their own life's journey. They were simply going out, enjoying a fun Saturday night before their lives were cut short by a staggering act of cowardice. We must resolve ourselves to honor their memory by not letting those lowly acts of terror and bigotry prevent us from enjoying life as they did on their last day. And we must also strive towards a more welcoming and accepting society that does not discriminate against people based on their race or their religion or their sexual orientation. To that point, our caucus stands in sorrow and solidarity with our LGBT brothers and sisters, and we pledge to work towards a better society in which we can all recognize that love is love is love. Mr. Speaker and members, I ask that we adjourn our House in honor of those who lost their lives in Orlando, and we must never forget them.
Ms. Brown, you were recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. 49 dead, 43 killed. In San Bernardino, 14 died. On behalf of the Legislative Black Caucus, I rise today to ask the California Assembly to adjourn in memory of the victims of the terrorist attack in Orlando, Florida. As one who has had experience with a terrorist attack in our community, I know what this means, and I know what that community is going through. I know how sad that community is. While terrorism has the ability to devastate a community, it can also bring a community together. And it brings it together in ways that you've never imagined. Our country can find inspiration and hope from the actions taken by the residents of Orlando in Orange County, Florida. The people of Orlando waited in long lines to donate blood to victims of the shootings. Some of them even carried victims to the hospitals and to the paramedics and used pickup trucks to take them to safety. Their actions, along with the heroism of the police and first responders, undoubtedly saved lives. This horrific massacre was made possible by the forces of extreme hate and the unfortunate things that still inhabit our country, especially whenever you talk about what's happening in the larger media. It's incumbent on every American to stand with our nation's LGBT community and with the residents of Florida and continue to speak out against hatred and bigotry. Our deepest condolences go out to the victims and their families as we keep them in our thoughts and in our prayers. Once again, I ask that the Assembly adjourn in the memory of victims of victims of a terrorist attack, the one this time in Orlando, Florida.
Thank you, members. Please bring the names to the desk to be printed in the journal. All requests to adjourn in memory will be deemed read and printed in the journal. The session schedule is as follows. Tuesday, June 14th, check-in session and floor session upon call of the Speaker. Wednesday, June 15th, floor session upon call of the Speaker. Thursday, June 16th, floor session at 9 a.m. All other items remaining will be passed to retain. All motions shall be continued. Seeing and hearing no further business, I am ready to entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Gibson moves. Ms. Waldron seconds. That this House stands adjourned until Wednesday, June 15th, upon call of the Speaker. Quorum call is lifted.